Well, hello and welcome to the A-List. I'm Jason Flam, alongside my guest today, Emery Moorehead, former NFL Super Bowl champion with the Chicago Bears, and thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, Jason.
First thing I got to ask you is, who are you really rooting for in the Super Bowl back in 2006 when your son Aaron was playing wide receiver for the Colts and they played the Bears, and you being a Bears Super Bowl champion? Were you torn, or was it an easy decision?
No, it was an easy decision. You always pull for your own blood, and
Right.
I had watched him play all through high school and down at the University of Illinois and on to Indianapolis. And I think like any father, no matter what you do, you're going to pull for your son, hope that he has success just like you did.
And your son played at Illinois, but you played at Colorado. What was the decision there?
Well, my son, an interesting guy. I never really pushed for him to play football. In fact, he didn't play football until he was in 8th grade. And eventually, he played football at Deerfield. And I didn't really get involved in the recruiting process because I wanted him to do it the way he wanted to do it. And he ended up walking on at Illinois as a free agent and eventually making the team and starting some games and playing a lot down there. And again, he went undrafted after that period, didn't even get invited to the combine, but he got an opportunity at Indianapolis and went down there and made the team and played 5 years and got a Super Bowl ring, and pretty good career for a guy that made it on his own.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Evanston. Long time ago, when Evanston was a powerhouse in football,
Right.
and state champions, and I decided to go out to Colorado, as you said. I went out there and really enjoyed the outdoors, the just the sun shining all the time, and the space that was everywhere, and the weather was great, and they had a great football team at the time. The Big Eight at that time was finished 1, 2, 3 in the national polls with Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Colorado, and I wanted to go out there and get challenged by a great program.
And then you got drafted by the New York Giants. So what was that like?
Well,
Hearing your name being called in the NFL.
Well, that was it was a I don't know. When I got drafted, I was so excited. We had a lot of guys get drafted. In fact, our particular senior class had like 8 guys get drafted, and so everybody was getting picked ahead of me. And finally, when my name came, I was so happy because at that time there were 12 rounds in the draft. And they did 5 rounds in the first day, and I got picked like, I don't know, maybe the 2nd or 3rd or 4th pick in the 6th round. So I had to wait a whole day before I got drafted. And then finally, when I got drafted, I was so excited. And to this day, I'm grateful for the New York Giants for taking my name off the board.
So you played receiver and you played fullback for the Giants. Now, was it different, a lot different playing fullback than receiver? Was it easier? Or?
Well, receiver, you hardly touch anybody. You're just out there running routes and blocking DBs, which are a lot smaller. But when you play fullback, and I used to tell Matt Suey all the time, I have so much respect for him because I played my 3rd year with the Giants as a fullback. And, you're blocking middle linebacker every play, defensive ends, defensive tackles, outside linebackers. And I'll never forget the very first preseason game I played when I played fullback. I was going against Jack Lambert almost every play from the Steelers. And I was so I said, this dude, he has no teeth. And he's screaming at the refs. They're like changing plays because Jack said it was wrong. And I was like, man, this is a tough position. And it is a tough position. So I really respect the fullback position a lot.
So then you got traded to the Denver Broncos.
Played a year out in Denver as a wide receiver and played on special teams. And then the next year, Dan Reeves came in as a coach and just didn't like my style. He cut me. And the Bears picked me up. I came here for the rest of that preseason and then got cut on the last cut and was out of football for like 7 games. And then finally the Bears called when there were some injuries to the wide receiver position. They picked me back up. I finished out the season with them, and then they fired the coach. Coach Dicker came in. I moved to tight end, and the rest is, as I say, is history. I ended up playing another 7 years at tight end.
And what was the story behind the transition to tight end? You played receiver and fullback. Why did they decide it was?
Well, the rules were changing, and they had changed the rules where they wanted smaller, quicker guys out at wide receiver, and I was a guy that was 210. Now today, these guys at 210 are much more athletic. They can do a lot more things. At the time, they wanted smaller, quicker receivers. That's why I figured out they were kind of moving me around, trying to figure out where I could play. And Dicker came from Dallas, the same place that Dan Reeves came from when he took over the job at Denver, so I knew the offense they were going to put in, and I knew that my size was not going to be what they were looking for at wide receiver, so I asked Coach Dicker, could I put on a few pounds and move to tight end? And it worked out for everybody because I was a receiver that was very nimble inside, that could get away from linebackers, and they'd have to put safeties on me and sometimes cornerbacks on me because of the speed that I had. And I was, it was an advantage to me because when they were trying to have linebackers cover me, I was so much faster and quicker, and it made for good matchups for me.
Did it help that you had a Hall of Fame tight end coach?
Well, I tell you what really helped was the fact that I had a Hall of Fame running back. And when you run play action and they fake the ball to Walter Payton, those linebackers have a tendency to come up first to check the run. And because I was a wide receiver, I was very good at releasing off the line of scrimmage. And I'd be running down the field, and I'd hear them turn around, going, oh my God, there he goes. And I'd be down the field 15 yards before they knew that they had to turn around and try to get back to cover. So that helped me a lot.
And I think I read that you had the distinction of having the longest pass play or longest reception of one of the seasons.
1986, we were coming out of the halftime at Atlanta, and the very first play, they ran a little, what they call a seam pass to me up the middle, and the safety got caught out of position, and it was a foot race down to the end zone, and I got caught on the 1 foot yard line, 1 yard away, and but it was the longest pass in the NFC that year.
And what was it, 84 yards?
86 yards.
86, wow.
86 yards. 1 more yard, that'll match my number.
So, talk about playing with Walter Payton. You mentioned it a little bit. How good was he?
He was, easily the best running back. I mean, there were good guys that were really good. Walter was the best all-around back, though. He threw for 11 touchdown passes on the halfback option. That's how good he was.
He could have ran the Wildcat now.
He could have been. He would have been the Wildcat back, exactly. And he led the team in receiving a lot of years. In fact, he was the all-time leading receiver for the Bears. I'm not sure if he still is or not. And not to mention being the all-time greatest runner in NFL history when he retired. He was a great blocker and a great team guy in the locker room because he had great work ethic. And no one was in better shape any time we came to training camp than Walter Payton. And the testimony to him is, of course, that he only missed one game in 13 years and playing the toughest position there is.
And I think that game he missed, he asked to play, but they wouldn't let him.
They wouldn't let him. He could have played, but they held him out, and that was his rookie year.
So he was a leader in the locker room, and did you guys look to him, for leadership, or who really was the center of that team?
Well, there were a lot of centers of that team.
A lot of characters.
Yeah, a lot of characters on that 85 team. And McMahon was a great leader because of his ability to lead the team and make changes and get Dick upset and come through and still make the plays. Our offensive line played together for about 7 or 8 years together. So there was leadership among them because they were a solid group.
Right.
Dicker obviously was a leader because he pulled it all together, offense and the defense, and then the defensive side of the ball. They were all crazy. Every one of them wanted to be the chief. There was no Indians on that defensive side because they all were great players and they all wanted to be the best player and they challenged each other.
A lot of them have become coaches too.
Yeah, Rivera and Mike Singletary. Leslie Frazier, who'll probably be a head coach next year in the league. They all really took to the style that Buddy taught. Right. And each of them has a little bit of that in their style of defense as well.
Jeff Fisher was on that team.
Jeff Fisher, right? Yeah, he went with Buddy when he went to Philadelphia, but he was a player on that team, and he's the longest tenured coach on the same team in the NFL right now, which is hard to believe. So, but Fish again. So yeah, there's a lot of. It's funny, they're all on defense, not on offense, but all the guys on defense are all doing very well on coaching.
So why didn't you get into coaching?
Well, for me, I knew. I mean, you play and you go to work at 8:30 in the morning. You're leaving out of that locker room about 6 o'clock. And those coaches, they have to be in there earlier. They have to stay in there late. And there's no family time in that environment. And it takes a lot of dedication to be a coach. And a lot of coaches, not all, but a lot of head coaches, when they don't win, they feel they have to work more.
Right.
And so they're in there and they're sleeping on the couches and all that kind of stuff. And
They take a lot of heat, too.
They do, and you can't fire 45 guys. So, the head coach has got to go when a team doesn't perform. And I just think that was very fair.
But your son's in coaching now.
Well, he knew what he was getting into, and we talked about it. And he's at the University of New Mexico as a graduate assistant, going to school and helping out the offensive football coaching staff. And he's also had to double this year as a wide receiver coach when there was an incident that had one of the coaches had to quit. And so he really got his work cut out for him this year. He learned a little bit about everything.
And he's in coaching now, so he's got his own thing. But now you're in realty, in real estate, and you're a realtor.
I actually got my real estate license right after the Super Bowl, that off season.
And all these distinctions you have now, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm doing a lot. I always felt if you get something out of something, you should put something back in. And as a kid, I was an Eagle Scout and in Boy Scouts, and so I've always believed that. They told us that when we got it, and I've been on that board, the Northeast Illinois Council of Boy Scouts, for over 20-something years, and I've been in real estate for 23 years. And so now I'm the chair-elect of the North Shore Barrington Board of Realtors, and next year I'll be the president of that board to ensure that things that I enjoyed and that I learned coming through the real estate, that those things are improved and that other people can use that board as a resource. And the National Association of Realtors and Illinois Association of Realtors that are there for people. And I just want to get that word out and let everybody know in the real estate industry that, it's good for me and I'm putting some back in. So that's why I'm trying to head this organization.
So, what was the real reason that you wanted to get into realty? Was it just because you enjoy, communicating with people? And
well, I was a radio TV major and had done a lot of work during the off season, also with CBS and NBC as well here in Chicago. And at the time, there weren't a lot of media outlets. I mean, there was no ESPN radio, all these other type of talk radio for sports. And Jonathan Rogers at CBS had said, well, we can send you up to Milwaukee or we can send you out to Rockford. And at that time, I still wanted to be right here in Chicago, which is hard to start in that profession in one of the biggest media cities in the United States. But so I chose to go into real estate because I grew up in Evanston. I knew what my parents paid for their house. I knew what it was worth at 1986, and I'm like, you know what, the real estate, people are going to be coming in and out, people have to move, and the real estate's been very solid along the North Shore of Chicago for a long time, and who knew what would happen the last 3 years, but it's been 20 great years of servicing clients and watching people, fulfill their dreams and moving into houses that they just love, and it's a great career, and it's been very fulfilling for me.
Well, soon enough, you might have to help Lovie Smith sell his house here.
Yeah, that's inevitable. As Coach Dickey said, and this day too will pass. Right. But it's inevitable when you get hired. You're hired to get fired.
Right.
And nobody has the luxury of Don Shula.
Tony Dungy.
Yeah, Tony Dungy, and he left on his own terms. Right. But the year of 20 years in one place is not hardly going to happen again.
Right. So, having said that, what's your opinion on the Bears this year? I mean, they're in shambles, but...
The Bears are done. They're toast. They had a horrible year. They had, moments where they were an exciting football team, but they never were able to play offense, defense, and special teams all together for 60 minutes. And that, it hurt them a lot this year. They had some injuries, but, you're supposed to overcome injuries. That's what the team aspect of it is. Somebody else steps up, gets an opportunity, and they take advantage of it, and the next thing you know, you might be a starter. And they didn't really have, they just didn't have the cohesiveness as a team to really take charge of some of the games that they could have this year.
So have you talked to any of the players at all and tried to give them any advice?
Well, the advice, when they asked me, it was about 3 weeks ago, and I told them they was toast in. I said, you guys blew it, because every team they lost to was in the NFC, so there were no tiebreakers that could go their way.
Right.
and you know, they lost all their games out of the Central Division. Were all to the NFC teams, and you know, the Atlantas and the you know, the Arizona. They lost them all, so they pretty much had sealed their debt, even though they were mathematically into it until this past week.
So being a Chicago Sports Hall of Fame member, do you know, as a tight end, do you have any conversations with Greg Olson or Des Clark? Or
I actually sold Des the house a few years ago,
really?
and so I do talk to him occasionally. And Olson I've met a few times, a nice young fella too, nice guy. But you know, I let these guys, the coaches coach and players play.
Right.
And you know, people like me, we come on TV and you know, act like we know it all because we have nobody to answer to. But you know, we try to say the things that maybe they would want to say, but they can't say because they're players. You know, you can only wish that they finish the season healthy, that they don't get hurt, and that you know, you come back next year, you try to keep it together and put it together and get to the playoffs, and you know, it just didn't happen for them this year.
So do you have anything else you'd like to tell people about, you know, just follow whatever you need to do? Because obviously, you know, you put your passion and, you know, the work into football, and now you're in realty, and you're a very successful realtor. I mean, what do you have anything?
Well, you know, when you're out choosing what you want to do, and at first you got to, you know, of course, go to school, go to college, but you got to follow your passion. And the key is to get your degree. Once you get your degree, you know, you can find what you want to do, and it's not easy. You know, my son struggled with it when he came out of football for almost a year. I mean, he knew he wasn't going to be playing football in January, and it took him till the following February to really figure out, and he was changing every couple of weeks. So it might take some time, but you know, follow your passion, do what you want to do, make your hobby, your fun, your job. And if you enjoy talking to people, and if you enjoy working with people, you know, real estate is a great avenue for that. And a lot of times young people don't think of that because they think of other things, but more and more young people are getting involved in real estate as well. So whatever you do, you know, set a plan, set a game plan, just like I do in football. You got to map it out, how you're going to get there, what you got to do to get there, and follow your dreams and your passion.
Thank you very much for joining me today, Emery. This has been the A-List. I'm Jason Flam. For Emery Moorehead, the Chicago Bears Super Bowl champion. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.